Welcome back to this episode of the Strong and Kind podcast. This episode is with Wyatt Christiansen. Wyatt is a master's of kinesiology student. He's a strength coach. He's a really insightful person. He's very much into all things lifting and training. He's a powerlifting coach. He's a power lifter, but he's also just somebody who really enjoys the pursuit of strength and fitness. We had a really good talk about a number of things. I think there's some really informative and insightful pieces about positive self-talk or more optimistic self-talk, and just how we can blend together some of the art and science of coaching and training so that people can get good results and have fun training. It was a really great discussion. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for being here. Peace. All right, Wyatt. So we were just briefly touching on the fact that you went back to school, right? So what are you currently studying?
So I'm getting my master's in kinesiology at AT still, and I have an emphasis in sport conditioning and sport psychology.
So what made you go back to get those credentials?
So I graduated undergrad in 2020 with fitness wellness. Essentially, that was like exercise science with an emphasis on like coaching and behavior change.
Hmm.
And so I had been working. I mean, it's 2020, it was COVID, so I was working in a PT clinic as a tech. I was doing classes, and I had just started working with John Flagg with the online coaching and stuff. Um, and so I was doing that, and of course, I had I've had just a lot of friends who are like PTs or higher up in the coaching stuff. And so one of them, he was my former coach, and he's actually my roommate, Nate Henderson. He was going through PT school at AT still. And I looked into it, and I had another friend who actually did their master's kinesiology program. So I applied there just because I was like, all right, it's an online program. It costs a little less. End up getting in. And so I took a year off of school and then started up again that fall. I believe it was right after, or no, yeah, just that fall while I was still in Arizona. And it's just kind of with the idea of like, well, I want to learn more. I value education. I value like just, you know, reaching for more. And I always felt like, I could go beyond just a bachelor. So it was kind of just like out of simple desire, and it was affordable being an online program.
Yeah, I mean, the affordable, that's the hard part about a lot of it is like I freaking love to learn. And I think it's really good to level up your knowledge, right? But like, I mean, some people are paying like $250,000 to go to physical therapy school, and like if you're paying that and then you come out and you look at the job market, which we could get into this, but there was too many physical therapists. Like we like it became the job, and then like every school opened an accreditation, and like accredited program, and it's just like there's got to be some balance here. And then paying that much, I did not pay that much. I'm very grateful I didn't pay that much. Not because I didn't value the education, but because like that amount of debt is crippling for a long time. All right, so like, because this is where we and you, I don't remember how we started chatting again. Like, I know of you, I don't know you personally. I know you through John Flagg, and I know just you through Instagram, which is really cool. But like, I think it was in the nature of like
I
simplicity.
actually looked it up.
Do you remember? All
Yeah,
right, yeah,
yeah.
remind me.
It was the meme of Loki from Avengers when he's like looking up at Hulk and he's like, "You damn dirty,"
Oh,
and then
that's right.
Hulk just starts smashing him, and the caption was like, you know, when when some evidence based coach needs 5 peer reviewed studies to justify picking up a dumbbell in a certain way, and then the Hulk
Yes.
smashes him and it's just like just lift hard or something along those lines. And then
Yes,
I
thank
reposted
you.
it saying something like, "I agree with this, and I'm getting my master's."
Yes, because this is where I'm at, and it's kind of my continuous point of frustration with is people we've just made it so complicated for people to like get started exercising. Like I have a few people that are like women in their 50s asking me about like optimal programs. Like not like they're not saying optimal, they're like what's the best
Yeah,
thing for me to do as a woman in my 50s? And it's like to start walking on a regular basis, go to the gym 3 times a week and resistance train, and then find other ways of activity that feel good and that get you out of breath,
yeah.
right? Like honestly,
Mhm.
it's so much about what's doable. But like, what have you found? Like what primed you to basically say that about that Loki and Hulk post?
I mean, so I very much like when I got into fitness in high school. Like I was following Alan Thrall, Jeff Cavalier, the Athlete Next guy, who I don't like anymore, Squat University. So
Yeah.
like I kind of like fell into, and then I found starting strength and barbell medicine, clinical athlete, stronger by science. I started finding like all the quote unquote like evidence based rehab and barbell athletic companies. And so that was my first like interest. Like, okay, cool. There's like a science to this because I was always interested in science.
Yeah.
Um, and by no means do I want any of this like further podcast to be like interpreted as like I hate science. Like I'm getting my
No,
master's.
yeah.
I love it. But um kind of what got me into it was just like, I got influenced. I'm like, oh, there's papers on this. You can like research it. Like this is freaking cool. What was the original question? I kind of just lost it in my
Like
head real quick.
what I mean, what led you to be like, I believe that train hard, as opposed to go look up
Oh,
5 studies to justify what you're doing in training?
um, honestly, just experience with myself and as a coach. Like, when you actually start working with people and especially like diverse age populations, you
Yeah.
realize like, okay, freaking optimal the way it's presented on Instagram, which again, I think there's still huge value in trying to get to those things and learning from them. But like the way it's presented is just like not doable for a ton of people, like especially in the online atmosphere. A lot of the ways I teach someone to lift or I work to change how someone performs the lift is not being there one on one, like cueing them live. It's, hey, you might use this cue when you go to do your set, but also I'm going to give you an exercise that like teaches you to do it by, reinforcing good habits or like negatively reinforcing bad habits. Like
Yeah.
if someone always dumps the bar forward, I give them a wider stance high bar squat. And if they dump it forward, boy, does that suck. So they learn to not dump it forward.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so just like kind of this learning of like people just need, first and foremost, they just need to train hard. Like I'd much rather someone train hard with, semi crappy form that's at least to somewhat standard than, a PVC in this perfect back position that never rounds, which we know is unrealistic and all that. But then I think the other big learning point for me was working with kids. Working with kids, you will see the most uncoordinated and the most coordinated kids. You'll see ones that learn like super easy or really great at it. And then you'll see kids who you're like, hey, don't let your knees touch when you stand up off the box. And then they do it 10 times in a row. And so I think working with kids has probably been the most valuable for just like, yeah, at some point, people just like, they got to make mistakes, they got to learn, and they got to just do a little bit on their own.
Yeah. What do you like what is it about kids that is a good example for all of us?
What do you mean by a good example? Like,
Like or what were the lessons that you learned from kids that like I'm trying to transfer this to my adults, right? Like or my older clients. Does that make sense?
yeah. I think one thing for the kids is just like one of my goals is always like I want them to, have fun. Not that we're like goofing off in the gym, but I want them to have fun and somewhat learn to take the gym seriously. Like, okay, I've got a big metal stick on my back. I probably like shouldn't be goofing around. I should like learn the basics of how to squat, how to put it back in a rack, um, you know, things like that. So it's like it's this balance of just like, hey, go in. I want them to have fun. I want them to learn about like putting in hard effort, doing hard things, being a little uncomfortable and being okay with that.
Yeah.
Um, but then balancing that with just like learning like the idea of going into a session, um, not necessarily with the idea of like, oh, I'm gonna hit this weight today, because kids don't care about that for the most part. Maybe some of them do as they get older, um, but a lot of times it's just like I want to get them in. I want them to have fun. I want them to put in effort. And if we change the movements every week, that's fine, because if they are having fun and that keeps them more engaged, I'd much rather that than like, hey, we're gonna run starting strength and we're gonna add 2.5 pounds every single session. Like I don't give a shit about doing that for kids. I just want them to go in and train hard and learn and have fun.
The that's the thing I also am just coming back to more and more is like in reality, I think like training is something that you should explore throughout your lifestyle. And like, so I can't tell anybody that. Like, I want that to be revealed to them over time, right? But like, because like that's one of the biggest arguments. And don't get me wrong, I think starting strength is an awesome program. I honestly
Oh yeah.
wish at like 18, I would have had somebody be like, yeah, do this. Like, don't drink a gallon of milk a day type of thing. And then maybe unless you really needed it, but like do this, and we're still probably going to run and jump a little bit because that's one thing I think that gets lost in the sauce there with starting strength.
Oh
But
yeah.
like, let's
I'm
just,
still part of the Facebook group, and it's bad.
I mean, it's just so much dogma, right? But like, I mean, I really, and this is another thing I wanted to talk about with you. It's like, because social media is like a kind of a cyclical, okay, we're seeing like, hey, if you're not doing the same exercises every week, you're not doing progressive overload. I'm like, well, that's kind of not totally true, right? Like, because if you're
Yeah.
doing a squat variation and it's slightly different from week to week, like you're still theoretically and in reality getting stronger, especially if engagement in training is high, right?
Yeah.
Like there's dudes out there who are just, it's not they're running like some variation of like a west side thing and they're getting fucking strong because they're just loving training, right? As opposed to, hey, I gotta go do my low bar squats every week until, and some people like, this is another thing we can get into, but some people do benefit from that. It's like kind of matching your training to the athlete, right? But let's get into that, because you're getting did you say it was sports psychology? Like,
That's my one of my emphases in the kinesiology. So it's a
yes.
kinesiology degree, and then we could choose like from like 8 different tracks. I chose conditioning and psychology.
So what's our like, what have you taken away from each one of those tracks? Is like your big things.
So the conditioning has been fun because it's also incorporated a lot of like speed stuff. So I'd actually just finished my speed, agility, and quickness course on Sunday. I had to write a 10-page paper, which was fun. Um, but the things I like took away from that a lot was just like, oh, West Side talks about using bands and doing dynamic effort work. Oh, look at, every single like pretty much like athletic population that has meaningful strength and conditioning. They're doing accommodating resistance for squats and deadlifts, or they're doing explosive stuff like clean pulls, cleans, snatches, hang cleans. They're doing band assisted jumps to where you're getting the concentric to be faster. And it was just more and more getting into this research of like overspeed eccentrics, overspeeds concentrics, the utility of things like isometrics, specifically overcoming isometrics or extremely heavy yielding isometrics to get better tendon strength. I was looking into it mostly for Achilles and patellar tendon because kind of the emphasis I went on for my paper was like trail runners.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, just like seeing that stuff and being like, okay, how can I take these things and incorporate it? And like we had discussion posts every week, and I almost always brought it back to like, okay, how am I interpreting this for power lifters and strongman competitors? Because that's who I mainly work with.
Yeah,
Um,
I like
and
it.
so it was interesting to go over that stuff because like, on one side, let's just use, banded squats. West side style, you're doing 50% plus 20% in bands. And there, the emphasis there is you want to move fast. You want to let the bands take you down fast. So you get an overspeed eccentric, so you supposedly get a stronger, more robust stretch reflex. You like hit the box and then you stand up as hard as you can, as fast as you can, and the bands essentially just keep you from turning it into a jump. And so, I get thinking on that, and I'm like literally just thinking this out as I'm writing. I'm like, okay, when is that appropriate? When is it inappropriate? Well, if someone going faster immediately like just loses their squatting posture, their position, it turns their squat to shit. Maybe I don't want to do that overspeed eccentric. Maybe I want them to go down with the same tempo they normally would, but still push up just as fast.
Yeah.
Or I see someone who's like goes excessively slow and is just like they don't go down fast enough, and I'm just like, hey, let the band pull you down. And I see that, and I see the same form, like, okay, maybe we use these, and it actually teaches them to squat a little faster. Because of course, in a heavy back squat, the stretch reflex, yes, it is used, or just all things, but it's used, but not to the same degree as like a maximal vertical jump.
Yeah.
Like the stretch reflex matters a lot more for a jump than it does a squat. It still matters for a squat. So I'm not going to care too much that everyone has a fast eccentric. I'm going to care more that everyone has a controlled eccentric with a good posture for whatever their squat type is. But then that also got me thinking this week. Well, it's like, all right, should I maybe, because I tend to be one where it's like I really don't I don't feel well when I go really really fast on a squat,
Yeah.
eccentrically. So I was, kind of just bouncing some ideas off Nate this week and myself. Just like, well, maybe I should try, band assisted squats where it actually speeds up your concentric. Because then, the whole benefit of bands, and I'm getting really specific here, but bands essentially, they're different from chains in that they change the acceleration of gravity, essentially. So
Yeah.
if a band, like the way I envision it, if I have a slingshot and I shoot it down, now that rock that I just shot down is falling with the speed of gravity plus the tension from the band.
Yep.
Versus, if I shoot it up, now it's, going against gravity, but that band is helping it.
Yep.
So for me, like being someone who's not like, I don't feel a ton of benefit from doing faster eccentrics on my squats. Maybe I need faster concentrics so that I can, be more explosive when I come out of the hole so I can learn to accelerate faster. Um, and so that was just like one interesting take. I have no idea if it really is legit or not from like the speed, agility, and quickness course.
Well, I think there's a component there of like you have to then test your hypothesis, right? And like this is almost
Exactly.
a good segue into like the sports psychology piece of it because my biggest thing that I run into is like I get because of kind of who I am, I attract like overthinkers, right? And um and so what happens, like, dude, the physical therapy and the exercise training world is like basically like, what is the perfect dose? It's like it's gonna be this bandwidth, right? What are the
Yeah.
perfect exercises? It's gonna be this bandwidth of like, what do you want to do? Like, do we feel pretty good about what we're doing, right? And like one of the most challenging things I have found in the past, like since I started my business was when people kind of have a training background. Honestly, the people who like are just like they don't really care that much as long as they're making progress are awesome to coach because it's like yeah we can
Mhm.
like kind of play around with different schemes and stuff. So the people who like and it's this is also me are like yeah so I saw Mike Israel talk about this and then I saw this other guy talk about this and it's like it's narrowing down to like what's actually doable, where your preference is at, and then what's going to actually benefit you because it's really easy to get like you could just be like I just squat really slow for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But then it's like well how do I convince you like that like we should work on you doing it differently. Like I have a super one of my clients is he is a super strong powerlifter. When his off season starts, I have tried to get him to do some form of like power training, like more
Hmm.
like power, even just power cleans, and he'll do
Yeah.
them for like a session. He's like, I freaking hate these. Can we not do these? I'm like, sure, it's fine, right? But when it comes to the psychology piece, like, because I think there's a segue of this is what I'm learning, this is what I want to implement, but like how do I get myself and others to kind of either I hate the word buy-in. I don't hate the word buy-in. It's just become like a cliche. Like how do I get them to
Yeah.
buy in? Right. So, but what are your thoughts there if you follow my train of thought?
I mean, I definitely think it's hugely like an individual case by case thing. Because I have some people who are just like, okay, yeah, I'll do that, no problem. And I'm those ones I'm like, this is great. You're easy. Like I tell you what to do and you do it. You don't really bother. And then there's the people who, again, and I don't dislike this at all, but who are like very collaborative.
Yeah.
And then there's people who very much like are kind of these three categories. So you got people who just do whatever, people who want to collaborate, and then people who are like already have an idea of what they want to
Yeah.
do, and they
Yep.
just want someone to tell them to do it,
Yep.
or to organize it. And so I think those three categories you got to treat a little differently. Um, like, so the collaborative ones, I think I enjoy those the most because those tend to be like, hey, I've seen these things. I'm kind of interested in this, but it's not this all like, can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? Um, and it's more so like, where would this fit? There's a lot more questions in that collaborative type athlete. And
Yep.
those ones I love because then we get to discussions. I get to be a freaking nerd.
Yep.
And usually I can find like, all right, hey, maybe let's try this for a block. Let's see how you like it. Let's see how it feels. And it allows them to experiment because they're getting to be involved in it. They definitely have like that buy-in and just like, oh, cool. Like I'm doing this. Like I want to do this. I'm trying it. And then at the end of the block, we talk about it or whatnot. And it's like, yeah, I really like that. Maybe we should include it more often. Or it didn't go as well. Like one of my guys, the length and partial stuff. It's still new. I'm still not totally bought into it, but he's always been like he likes some of the bodybuilder stuff more. And so when some of that came out, we're like, hey, let's do some of it. Like I know you like this stuff, and he did it, trained hard, went to failure, like it just enjoyed training and got it done super, super well. And then you have that athlete who's more so like sees everything on Instagram and wants to try and do everything. And that's the ones where it's like, okay, you got to rein them in a little bit. You're like, all right, maybe I give you a slot where it's like, that's where I like to give slots where it allows for creativity.
Yeah.
Like I might just say, I don't want to say junk volume because people have also bastardized junk volume because it's just like, hey, sometimes it's just nice to do volume for sake of volume. Sometimes it's just
Yeah.
nice to grab a band and do sets of 50 tricep extensions. I don't
Dude,
care.
100%. Like it just sometimes
Yeah,
shit just feels good. There's nothing like
yeah,
people the rigidity in thinking is something and for myself and others like just like okay, at the end of the day, if you do 100 band tricep push downs, like who cares? Like if that is the thing that throws off the rest of your program, it's not that thing. It's like how we're thinking about it, right?
yeah. But so normally with that person, I'll kind of organize like a creative day, and usually it ends up like most commonly we'll have a 3 day like lifting session, 3 lifting sessions that I mainly program, and then they get like, hey, let's have a GPP day. Here's the things I want you to hit.
Yeah.
Go have some fun.
Yeah.
Or even one of my guys, Jamel, he's one of my masters lifters. He's just been in fitness his whole life. Like, dude's jacked. First USAPL meet he does, the director walks up to him and says, "You're getting drug tested after this." But anyway, he during his off
I'm
season,
envious of that
yeah,
guy because no one will
oh
ever
yeah,
be like, you're getting drug tested.
I love it. I forget that he's 45. I always do because he's explosive.
Yeah.
But anyway, like he and I kind of have like an unspoken deal. Like during off season when he's like not really going into prep or anything, he has what he calls weird shit Wednesdays, and he
Mhm.
just goes and he does stuff that's fun that he wants to try with his classes that he coaches and whatnot, or just that like he and I we both like the range of strength dude and
Yeah.
just other like odd lift guys. And we're just like, yeah, it's a fun day because I think we all forget that we all get to the point where it's like training's all about powerlifting and what you're going to put up, on the platform in 6 months. It's just like, it can still be fun. You can still just do things that are challenging and different. Like at the end of the day, these are hobby sports, just like, recreational basketball or soccer. You
Yeah.
play it to have fun. Yeah, you want to get better. Yeah, you want to win. You want to do well. You want to succeed. You also still just want to have fun. And
Yeah.
if, doing heavy suitcase carries is fun, go for it. Do it.
Yeah. No, I think that ability, I mean, a lot of it is just being okay, because this leads me to just an overarching question. Like what frustrates you in like the fitness and strength and health space? Like what are the things that you're like, that fucking pisses me off, right? What are those things?
Probably just like the should you do X exercise or Y exercise? And then especially when the art or when the reasoning gets become, well, you should do Y exercise because it's more specific to the competition list. I remember seeing this once and it was like box squats, pin squats, pause squats. And the dude was like, yeah, you should do pin or pause because it's more specific. And I was just like, then why not just do the comp squat? So that's probably one of my biggest pet peeves is when people use specificity as their justification for everything. Because I'm like, you probably need to like go in a college strength conditioning weight room and see how low specificity is. See how it does not look like what they do on the field.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because the thing I try to tell people is like, I'm not training with the goal of specificity in mind. I'm training with the goal of eliciting certain adaptations
Yeah.
or adaptations that maybe not don't help your total right now, but set you up to help your total later down the road. Like we know pretty well that like acute muscular hypertrophy is not really going to do much for strength. But if you gain muscle over the course of years, you do some hypertrophic work, you stay in a calorie surplus, your capacity to produce force is going to go up. That's 6+ months. That's a year. That's 2 years. And
Yeah.
people suck at conceptualizing anything beyond 6 months, really.
It's
So that's yeah,
I'm 100% with you. I think it's really hard to conceptualize, and even just my understanding of like general adaptation and like specific adaptation to impose demands. It's like this sounds like absolutely crazy, but like they're kind of the same things, even though they're like the freaking dichotomous like
yeah,
general adaptation, right? Because like what I'm trying to do in the weight room with a football player is not that much different than what I'm trying to do in the weight room with a volleyball player, right? There are
Yeah.
certain different demand, like what their sport is going to elicit the demands from the capacities that we build more so than
Yeah.
the training. Like this is what I think we've really gotten wrong with a lot of stuff when it comes to like preparing, like powerlifting and Olympic lifting are awesome sports. But and I'm also just shifting to like I think powerlifters and Olympic lifters should train like athletes a little bit more, especially if they want to stay healthy, right?
Yeah.
Like because I think the biggest thing that happens to people is they burn out on specificity and they lose their love of that thing because they're not doing enough just other stuff that is enjoyable training, right? I don't know if that's true, but I think that's what I see. But like yeah, I think the overarching thing, and this is a marketing strategy, you know, like people do want to feel seen and heard and validated, but like you don't have to train athletes that differently. Like come in, train power, train strength, train some hypertrophy, train movement and mobility and explosiveness, and like then let the sport do what it does, right? Like go practice the sport. And I think people just, yeah, oh, I'm doing, you know, I just don't think there's enough to like justify like I'm doing this squat because it's going to elicit this as opposed to this squat. It's like, no, you're just making your legs stronger, right? And maybe reinforcing a position that maybe will give you some more confidence on the field type of thing, right?
Yeah.
Uh, go
So
ahead.
I've never posted this meme, but I'm made in my head one time. I don't know if I ever made it on my phone, but essentially, like you go back like 5 to 10 years and you look at all the evidence based posters and whatnot, and there'd be plenty of memes about like joking about like how stupid sport specific training is, and then everyone's doing comp squat 3 times a week now in powerlifting. Like
Mhm.
you're just doing sport specific training there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I've just always found that funny.
And even then
Which
it's like
also you can be fine doing that
it
too.
can be,
Like you
yeah, it
can
can
do the
work
same
really
squat. Yeah.
well. It's most of it's
Yeah.
like how bored are you of doing freaking low bar squats, right? Like cuz
Yeah.
that's a lot of it. Like, you know, for the people that I have on my roster that want to compete, like I'm just always trying to balance like I just want to keep you healthy and not burnt out on this. Like, and so that's
Yeah.
always, and like you said, it's an individual thing where it's like, hey, how much specificity do we need? When's your next meet? Right. The next meet's an awesome thing because it automatically reinforces like, okay, I got this in the future, which I think gives people a reason to train. That was like the
Yeah.
only reason I did powerlifting meets, and I will do powerlifting meets again, and I'll do Olympic lifting meets again. But there, you just go through phases where like I got to sign up for something that forces me to just focus a little bit because
Mhm.
otherwise I just go run. Like I just go run every day for 45 minutes and call it good. You know, but I like lifting but the problem is there's just so much running is like literally this is what I'm going to do, right? Where in the gym it's
Yeah.
like I have so many options and none of them, you know, are like it's not that it's just there's a lot of options. Like I could go, do I want
Yeah.
to be Alec Blennis? Do I want to try to be Alec Blennis or do I want to try to be Mike Griswold or whatever? And like, you know,
Yeah.
and it's really just well, do what the hell you want to do, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And I think people get too caught up in like, well, if I'm not training for powerlifting, I'm getting weaker. And it's just like you might not be able to display your same maximal strength while not doing powerlifting, but it's just like my last powerlifting meet was May 2023. And I deliberately said, like, I'm not going to compete in powerlifting the rest of 2023, all of 24. I'm going to do different stuff. And I did a strongman meet last month, and it was so much fun. Like, I added 19 pounds to my overhead that I hadn't trained in years. And I was just training like different stuff because it was very odd events. And then also 3 weeks later, I had a kind of a race. I finished in like the 86th percentile or something, but it was a hike up a mountain that was 2.8 miles and 3,700 feet of vert. And it
yeah,
was just like, it was all so very different from powerlifting. And now I'm getting back into powerlifting because I decided to do a meet in January. And it's just like, oh, I missed powerlifting. Like I
yeah,
did enough different stuff. I stepped away from it. And like, lo and behold, I didn't get weaker. I actually set a squat PR in the last year. Um, I nearly set a bench PR doing reverse grip in the last year. I haven't really pushed deadlift too much, but it's just like I did all these different things. I did different training methods. I started experimenting with max efforts, dynamic efforts, and repetition efforts. Um, my gym has access to a lot of really great bodybuilding stuff. And so I've been putting on weight and deliberately training a bit more like a bodybuilder. And it's just like I don't really need to worry about getting weaker because I am consistent with training. I just,
Yeah.
yeah. And so
It,
I think it's worthwhile for people to realize, like, go have fun, do different stuff, try different things, do a block of high bar. The next meet I'm doing also, I'm not doing any belt or sleeves just
yeah.
for fun.
Yeah,
Because why
just to
not?
see what you're so because that's what I wanted to touch on because you're like you kind of were an asshole to yourself there about like I finished in the 86, dude, like that climb is hard, like this is
Oh
what
yeah.
also people do in the fitness space is like
Yeah.
it's either we're bragging because we won or we're shitting on ourselves completely because we didn't win, right? And it's like a lot of what I mean, I'm playing tennis on Monday nights and it's so freaking fun. Am I good at tennis? No, right? Am I better than a lot of people? Yes, but I'm still a relatively athletic 36-year-old dude. If I play somebody who's actually good at tennis, I'm gonna get my ass kicked, right? But it's just like the other thing that like doing that makes me want to train in ways that are I'm still gonna squat and bench and deadlift and power clean and Olympic lift and all that stuff, but like doing a little bit more just jumping, like lateral, like and even just quick sprints, that type of stuff. It really just having other ancillary or like kind of tertiary like things that you like to do. I think what happens is we look at like people like I'm gonna say like Alex Viada, right? It's like, well, I got to do it exactly like Alex Viada to be a hybrid athlete, or even like Doc Liss, right? Like, because these are just influencers that come to mind. It's like I got to run 100-mile runs and be a power lifter. And it's like they're just laying out that they like doing this, and like
Yeah.
you can find somewhere in between what they like and just pursue that, and you're okay, right? Um, but I think what happens is people are like, well, to be a hybrid athlete, I have to lift super heavy and I have to run really, really long. It's like, no, like what's gonna make you feel good, right? What's gonna make your
Yeah.
life better? And yeah, so
Yeah. Go
you
ahead.
go.
You. Oh,
I'm
I
just
was gonna
right there.
say, in one of my last assignments for psych, we were talking about like retiring from sports, and I will say this, I don't mean this like negatively towards anyone, but whenever someone says I'm retiring from powerlifting, I always find that a bit goofy
I
because
cringe. I cringe. It's like, why?
yeah, like I get if like, okay, you're Dan Grigsby and you're like, yeah, I've deadlifted 1,000 pounds multiple times in competitions, like, okay, yeah, you never want to do that again. You've hit your peak, like, cool. But for the most part, it's just like, one, you can always select your own weights. And again, this is not to like insult anyone who has said they're retired or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
do you like do your own things? But it's just like at the end of the day, it's a hobby. I'm not gonna say I'm gonna like retire from trail running. I'm just maybe doing it less. But I also think too, like because people make it such a part of their identity, whether it's powerlifting, strongman, Olympic lifting, ultra marathons, or whatever, like it becomes such an identity that we feel that like compelled to say like I'm retiring or I am this. It's really just like do things you enjoy. Like no people who are out there playing pickleball 2 or 3 times a week, they're not really saying like they're pickleball players, that they're professionals or anything. They're just they play it. They do the
Yeah.
thing. Like I've always wanted to make a shirt that says like I play powerlifting.
Yeah.
Because it's like that's what it is. I'm playing a you know kind of sport thing. We don't move our feet all that much.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I think we just get far too caught up in the identity. And I mean, that's where I've like really liked learning from like people like the Range of Strength dude, Josh Bryant. I love Josh Bryant stuff because like he's coached some of the best benchers in the world, but
Yeah.
also a lot of the people he coaches to be like tactical athletes. He's a big fan of like farmers, throws, jumps. I mean, if you go look up Josh Bryant YouTube, and there's this video when the dude's like over 300 pounds. He's like squatting 700 in his garage, and like in between his squat sets, he's doing like 36-inch box jumps at over 300 pounds.
Dude,
It's just like,
that's the cool shit to me is like where it's just like you're it's not it's not is it Masa ala de la Fuerza? Is this him? Is he is in Spanish? I don't know. Is this the
oh,
right?
he does have a Spanish page. Yeah, he has a
Okay.
large like
Okay.
Spanish following, I guess.
I mean, good for him, but like
Yeah.
so I'm gonna follow him, but like that's what I think is cool. So do you follow Will Rattel now?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like, I mean, so Will Rattel's YouTube channel has probably been my like my number one like educational resource the past like year and a half because he just like hits you with like a 3 minute like this is this is what I think about this, and I'm like, yeah, I love that, or okay, that's changing my bias a little bit, but like the I talk to John Flagg on a regular basis. John loves powerlifting, right? Like in a way that I really don't, right?
Mhm.
What I love is like, am I gonna keep deadlifting and pushing those things as best I can as I get older? Hell yeah. And I do honestly see myself in my 60s probably signing up for a powerlifting meet. You know why?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people just stop doing it. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go freaking win a powerlifting meet here.
Yeah.
Right. And or the same thing, I honestly kind of want to get in like a adult track meets because like I mean, I'm gonna get my ass kicked by people who've been running track their whole life, but like also me showing up and putting forth my best effort out like a 200-meter or a 400-meter run sounds like cool to me. But most people, yeah, again, this is not derogatory. I really think this is just programming based on like the medical establishment. And this sounds like super like weird and like conspiracy, but like hey, you're getting too old for that shit, right? Like, or your body's breaking down, right? And it's like, no, like you literally can rage against that machine. You just have to like probably my overarching message on Instagram is like most of this is just the dose of what you're trying to do, right? I hear it
Yeah.
from people who CrossFit, like, I was into CrossFit, I loved it. And then it's like, I'm like, well, how many days a week were you doing it? 5. How hard did you go every day? I went like balls to the walls. I'm like, okay, well, let's take a step back and look at that, right? But what are the things that when it comes to that type of stuff, that maybe you see successful athletes doing, like managing their mind and managing their training, and then how does a coach help with that? That's another good question there.
So I think one of the things to remember, especially if you're like getting into like more of that athletic stuff, like most powerlifters aren't going to sprint. They're not. I've been getting more of my powerlifters to start jumping, and this is not insulting to any of my lifters that are lifting, but it is hilarious to watch
Oh yeah.
because like none of them know how to do a fast eccentric to jump. They all like they kind of get down there and they like pause and then they jump. I'm like, no, it's a jump. You got to get a stretch reflex. And so like doing that's been fun. But like just on myself last year, I was like, I want to start sprinting again. I haven't really sprinted much since high school. Like, yeah, I've done some running, for undergrad experiments and whatnot and testing and that, but I haven't done like a straight up sprint. Ended up, I pulled my hamstring 3 times in like a span of 5 months.
Dude, yeah.
um,
I tweaked my groin and I was just an asshole to myself for like 3 months and I finally started to just like let it calm.
yeah,
It's so frustrating, right? But
yeah.
yeah, again.
But luckily, one of my buddies, he's a PT down in Phoenix, and he works with a lot of athletes. And like I told our group chat about it, and he's like, "Hey, let me rehab your hamstring. Like, I'll coach your sprint days." And so he gave me an acceleration day and like a top end speed day, and just like slowly brought me back up to it, to where it's like now just on my own. I've been alternating like because I do essentially one sprint day, one like run day where it's more of a distance where I'm just doing a mile or a 5K.
Yeah.
And so I'm alternating. One week is an acceleration day where I'm doing a lot more shorter sprints, like 5 to 10 yards. I'm doing like change of direction drills, things like that. Um, and then so next Wednesday or this upcoming Wednesday, actually, yeah, tomorrow, I'll be doing my top end speed. So it's like I'll do some like build up runs and some striders, some scissor kicks. But it was like, oh yeah, I can like deadlift over 600 pounds, but my hamstrings have not eccentrically lengthened fast in years.
Yep.
And so I think like the successful athletes, it's not just load management, but it's realizing like, okay, when was the last time you did those things? Because for most people, it was high school or college sports the last time they truly sprinted. And like, yeah, some powerlifters are like, yeah, I went for, a couple mile run, things like that. Like there's a few that like look into that, but like sprinting, it's just so many of us get away from it, or hard jumps, or like, again, kind of going towards Josh Bryant, just because that's kind of been my more recent inspiration, is just like hard med ball throws, farmers, sled drags, like a lot of that like strongman-y type conditioning stuff, along with like hill sprints, box jumps, things like that. Like again, just trying to be athletic, because I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like we get so caught up in this identity of I'm a powerlifter, I'm an Olympic lifter, I'm a strongman, when it's just like most of us, and this is not to be insulting, just real, like most of us aren't strong enough to really justify going 100% all in on powerlifting
Yeah.
and seeing like a meaningful increase in total from that. Like most of us are at a low enough dot score, GPL score, whatever metric you use, to where it's like, yeah, running some sprints is not going to take you down unless you let it, tear a hamstring or something. Doing some long distance or low intensity steady state cardio is not going to bring you down by any means. Doing some bodybuilding or some power training, or anything like that, just diverse training, is not going to bring down your powerlifting total in any meaningful way until you're at that certain threshold, which again, I don't know what that threshold is. It's a spectrum, of course, but like kind of my idea is like, okay, you're at a 400 dots, you're kind of a serious powerlifter. You can still benefit from doing those athletic things. 450, okay, maybe you're actually looking at being like highly nationally competitive and you can put, a lot of effort into powerlifting. 500 plus dots, yeah, powerlifting's your sport. You might actually be able to make a little money off that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just we get so caught up in this identity when it's like we all kind of found powerlifting because we found the gym, because we had fun in the gym, because we were doing random workouts, we were jumping, we were running, we were throwing weights around stupidly, like, and I almost want to bring people back to that, just like, hey, you can have fun still and powerlift.
Yeah. Well, I think you can agree or disagree with me on this. It's like most of it is like, so because training programs are good, right? But I also think what we've done here, I just always go back to like pumping iron. Like I know like Arnold and those other guys had a plan, but it was also just like go to the gym and just like work freaking hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like Arnold, like sprinting, like there's scenes with him running and sprinting, and then you just take the contrast of like the super specific type of training that a lot of people go down the hole of, because it really does seem like the way to advancement, right? But then you also look at like relatively high level like CrossFitters who CrossFit has changed too, where I do think there is more of this tactical like strength and conditioning oriented approach as opposed to just doing a shit ton of workouts a day that are some seemingly random. But like also like where a lot of my influence comes from is like I was really into CrossFit when Rich Froning was like the guy winning the games all the time, and I was like, Rich was really powerful and really strong, and then he could suffer, right? But like, you just have to create enough structure to advance you towards your goals, and I think what people let themselves do more so now than ever, and I think this has always been the case, is like, oh, that sprint workout is the reason. It's just like that deadlift was the reason that my back got hurt, right? Well, that sprint workout is the reason that this program's not working. And it's like, like, because you could take two people and they could run the same program and one of them has awesome results, and this is the individual nature of training, right? But like the person who's just like, yeah, I actually like that sprint workout because it was just different and it like got me moving in different ways. And like I'm gonna go, I go on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I have like a 25-minute sprint. Like it's kind of like you, where it's like buildups or top end trying to within the constraints of
Yeah.
my groin, and like it takes 20 minutes, and like
Mm-hmm.
that's fine, right? And it doesn't need to be this 2 hour long ordeal, right? But what's your take on that? Like, do we get in our own way? Because this is my other thing, like what's his name, John Hack, like, is it Hack, is that his name? Like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like he's like a super gifted dude, and from what I know about his training in general, to some extent, is like he's just trying to enjoy the process of training as much as possible while lifting heavy shit. And I think like that's kind of the thing to follow. Even Mike T's like a robot, but he still wants to really enjoy training. And I think how that looks for him is going to be different from a lot of people, but I think that's the key ingredient for a lot of us.
Yeah, I mean, this is again going back into like some of the recent psych stuff I've been reading and learning, but like legit positive self-talk, I think can make a huge difference. I'll tell you right now, uh, something I am working on and calling myself on is my negative self-talk about my bench.
Yeah.
Because since I started powerlifting, my squat has gone up something like 150 pounds. My deadlift has gone up like 200 pounds. My bench has gone up like 40.
Yeah.
Pretty drastically different. And so I have always made like self-deprecating jokes like, yeah, I got a garbage bench. Yeah, I'm built like a pear. I'm all lower body. And I can smile and laugh at that, but that it does reinforce those negative beliefs and, in my opinion, outcomes. So like one, just like if you're going into those workouts thinking like this is going to ruin my powerlifting, it absolutely will.
I'm really glad you
Yeah.
brought this up, because this is actually one of the things I meant to talk to you about is yeah, the reinforcing of beliefs in your ability based on the current state of things, right? Because that is the hard part about lifting in a lot of ways, is like, I mean, for me, it was like, honestly, squatting 315 for too long was like this thing where I'd get to 310 and I'd be like, "Ah," and then I'd go and just get plowed by 315 and I'm like, what the heck is that? That's not your body, right?
Yeah.
That's this getting in the way of you doing. And I think you maybe posted this. Who did this? Maybe you posted it. About getting out of the way of, and like letting your trusting your training, kind of. Maybe it was maybe your story this morning. Like relaxing, like
Um,
being able to relax and just
oh,
perform the thing.
this is something because I was right before my strongman meet, Travis Ortmeyer, he was like the guest judge there, big time strongman for people who don't know him. And he had a little seminar the night before. So of course I'm going to that. And like he's talking big into the psych stuff. And I was like, holy shit, this is aligned with everything I'm learning. But he brought up visualization, but a slight change in the technique that I had never really thought about. It seems commonplace now. Um, but so visualization is just, seeing yourself do the activity that you want to do, whether that's, scoring the game winning touchdown in a football game, like, every year with the Super Bowl, some wide receiver says they were doing that for months in advance and whatnot. For me, I did that a lot with my first 500 squat and my first 600 deadlift. Like I saw the exact number of plates. I knew what it was going to look like. So that when I went up and did it for the actual first time on the platform, mentally it wasn't the first rep. And what I used to do was I would do that visualization. I would often pair it with music. So specifically like my deadlift, my first 600-pound one, the song I used, there was an instrumental version. So every time that instrumental version came on, I was driving, I would hook grip the steering wheel just to add in that like sensory thing. I would feel it. I would kind of get that like flush feeling of just like I'm feeling my body more and everything. And I would get that like not full on adrenaline rush, but like hyper awareness and just like that feeling you get when you're like super excited but controlled and aroused and everything. The little tweak Ortmeyer uses was so that his example was like, I'm trying to deadlift 850 pounds. I'm seeing it every night before I go to bed. I'm seeing it every morning before I wake up. But when he picks up 850 pounds in his visualization, he's picking it up with the same effort as 225. He's normalizing it. He's making it the thing that he could do every day. And I've actually taken that into some of my athletes and talking with them. So my most recent example is Karen. She's another one of my masters lifters. PA Nats, she pulled 308 for an all-time PR. And now since then, she has touched 300 pounds in like multiple ways. And our goal has been, again, like both through visualization and through like physical action, to normalize the number 300. Like
Yeah.
how casual can we make 300? How many times can we pull 300, whether it's off blocks with chains? Like I don't care the variation. I just want 300 to be normal because I want her to open at that essentially.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that. And
yeah.
I think you come up against, so I think it's quantum mechanics, dude, are so like, it's such like a woo-woo thing to mention here, but like I think, humans, like, you level up, because once I did hit 315 for like my first, like when I hit 315 like the first time, um or actually, it was kind of like I did like a basically, I finally broke down. I didn't break down, but I wanted to do like the starting strength LP, right? So I actually like went and did it, right? And I think I got like to where I was squatting, I LP'd up to like 355 for 5. It was actually on my wedding day that I did that, and I gained like 30 pounds, which was dumb. My wife's like, "Why did you do that?" I like, it wasn't like muscle, dude. It was like I'm just getting, and
Yeah.
it was good, but when I did finally kind of get to that normalization of, okay, like 315 is like a chill squat for me. It's no, like that's when like it's the same with like when I was in high school and I got to like 135 on bench, or maybe it might have been like my freshman year of college. It's like, oh, I can bench 135 now. Okay. And that like you kind of level up, and then there's certain landmarks in the gym that we attribute, and then like when you get there, like if you just touch it and then you like don't normalize it, you kind of creep back to where you've normalized, right? And so that's the same thing a lot of times with lifting. I like that normalization approach because I think it does, it what you see happen is people will prep for a meet, and yes, you're gonna be at your, hopefully you've done it right and your peak is good, right? But then they like sink back down in training, and then like you know, you want to kind of get back to that like 10% with it. You're around that 10% up or down type of approach, right? Where it's hard to convey that to people. Like, you're literally a different organism every day, right? But you're within 10 to 15% of your like where you could be most of the time, unless you're just absolutely beating the shit out of yourself. Um, but I don't think people believe that enough. Like, I have a guy right now, love him. He's been with me for a long time. He could probably bench 405, but squatting 315, he just struggles under the bar, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, dude, I know how capable you are, but like until you believe that you're a good squatter, you're always going to be frustrated by it. Because
Yeah.
if you approach the bar and you're like, I'm not a good squatter, you're literally shrinking down, right?
Mhm.
And that's like, that's a problem, because you, until you believe, you're not going to level up. And that's a big component of a lot of this stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, just here's another like logical explanation of it is just like I have added significant muscle mass to my upper body. Like I've gone up a shirt size and everything, and my bench has not corresponded. And it's just like, okay, all the like physiological data, long-term hypertrophy studies suggest I should be able to bench more. And just the very, very slow, mild progress, that tells me that more of the issues up here. It's the confidence, and it's the belief. And so now it's like it's going back. I have to notice, be very, very mindful when I have that negative self-talk. I have
Yep.
to see like, oh, I'm saying this thing. Then it's like, why am I saying this? Okay, I'm saying this because I believe this. Well, what's the evidence for that belief? And then it's not necessarily trying to disprove the belief, because sometimes the belief can be justified. Like, one of the things, I had 2 shoulder surgeries in high school. You know, I've had some shoulder issues in the past. I've had a history of injury. Those are real things. And so I do have to acknowledge those. I can't disprove them because they're real. But then it's taking that sort of like, okay, what beliefs are real, what beliefs aren't, or not necessarily real, but like what are, correct beliefs, what are incorrect. With the incorrect, you can disprove them with logic, like, oh, I'm doing this, this, and this. But then with the ones where it's like, okay, well, I've had some shoulder issues, I've had some shoulder pain, and that causes fear. What are the actionable things I'm doing to overcome that? And well, for me, it's been like I'm smashing my rear delts. I'm doing rear delt flies. I'm doing face pulls before every bench session because it feels good. And when I do those, my bench feels better. And I'm doing this volume, and I'm finding ways to hit this number. And like again, I logic myself into, again, not disproving the beliefs, but just seeing the beliefs for what they are and seeing the good things I'm doing, things I can improve upon, and also disproving the things that are truly wrong. So again, I'm reshaping how my mind sees bench press. I'm trying to see it in that positive light, and not necessarily like, I don't like the term fake it till you make it. Like I think there is some utility in it, um, but more so get like justified reasoning and a justified amount of confidence into my bench press so that it can properly reflect what I think I'm actually able to do.
I think one of the benefits of working with a coach is that belief is typically borrowed until
Mm-hmm.
we
Yeah.
internalize it, right? Because when I program stuff for people, and like, I mostly am an RPE based programmer, right? But I do realize I have some people that benefit from just percent. I think percentages are awesome if you're
Oh yeah.
accordingly adjusting it. I think the utility of like RPE or reps in reserve is simply that, hey, on any given day, like, it's gonna vary. So don't feel, if you can on a good day hit 225 for 5, and on a crummy day you only hit 215 for 5, like, that's not that big of a difference. You're still getting you're going to drive adaptation if you do that right. But beliefs are just hypotheses, right? And so testing those hypotheses is really powerful. And then it really kind of goes back to, like, I mean, there is no, where humans go wrong, and this is kind of where I want you to finish up, because I want to respect your time, and I also got to hop to another call here shortly. But like, people immediately go to like, oh, it's my genetics, right? Even if they're not saying that explicitly, it's like, I'm just not powerful, right? And
Yeah.
it's really hard to overcome that, right? But like, it's still just a hypothesis, like, because we don't know what
Yeah.
your genetics are until you've pushed yourself, like, you know, I love Kobe Bryant. I love the Mamba mentality. It's like Kobe Bryant worked as hard as anyone has ever worked. And like Jordan was the same way. So I expect them both. And I love Michael Jordan, but like they worked so hard at their craft. And, you know, like they arguably, especially Jordan, you could arguably said like he wasn't like genetically gifted when he was 16 years old, right? He was gonna get good eventually. And then even like when he started to actually lift in preparation for basketball, he became like a different human being from a physical standpoint. But you could just as easily be like, well, I'm just a skinny basketball player. I can't level up. And so like, yeah, what would your like final messages be about like self-limiting beliefs be?
Yeah, I mean, so like obviously genetics is a component. I always say genetics is the threshold. Like they tell what your potential is, and almost no one will ever. Actually, I could pretty confidently say no one will ever reach 100%, just
Yeah.
because our environments will never truly be perfect enough to allow us to.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also like genetics. Sometimes they show up, and sometimes they're hidden. Like Jordan obviously had the genetics to be one of the
Yes.
greatest of all time,
Yeah.
but he had to do some stuff for those to be expressed. You have to be in the right environment, which is both internal and external. And there is actually one paper I love, and I can't remember the exact quote, but it essentially says that like the best athletes in the world are genetically superior and work hard.
Yeah.
They are genetically superior, but they are made by their environments. So most of us, we're not going to have that genetically superior, but we can still reach or climb as close to our genetic potential by working our asses off. And so that again involves like the hard work, the admittance of limitations, not to like, again, reinforce negative self-talk, but more so just acknowledge what is, and then, be able to say, one, work on positive self-talk, but also be able to like, okay, I have these hurdles to overcome. What's my game plan? How do I overcome that? Because I think that's where people like don't buy into like the positive self-talk, is they think it's too fake. They don't feel it's real. And it's like, yeah, you can do fake positive self-talk, and
Yeah.
that's faking it till you make it, which again, I'm not the biggest fan of. But it's like, okay, I have these limitations. What am I going to do about it? How am I going to set myself up to put in effort to overcome them?
Yeah.
And like, if you do reach your genetic potential or near it, you might not overcome them. Like, I'm 5'8". If I haven't squatted on the day, I'm not going to play in the NBA.
Yeah.
Like
100%.
I could work my ass off to get good at basketball, which again, I suck at. I have no ball handling skills. But like, say I was in basketball from, a young age all the way up, I could work my ass off. I could be a great basketball player, forever limited by my height,
Yeah.
forever.
There's always going to be real limitations, and that's where you have to match. You have to like test and match with things that like if you really want to be good at. Like yes, if you're 5'8",
Yeah.
unless unless you're the Muggsy Bogues of our generation, right? I don't even remember how Muggsy Bogues was still like 5'9", so he wasn't like he was just short for the NBA, right? But like, yeah, that's the reality of it, is like there's gonna be things that people are naturally suited for based on their genetics, right? But like until you've really pushed your threshold and tried, and that's really freaking hard. Yeah, you're not going to get there, right? So and when it comes to pain and injury and all this stuff too, and just in training in general, it's like, you know, I think what we've touched on a lot of times is like pursuing your passion, pursuing some enjoyment is a good way to to take away some of the comparisonitis that inevitably is going to happen in our like the things that we pursue here. So, you doing hill climbs or doing trail runs, like you just doing those, is if it makes you feel good and you enjoy it, like that's a worthy enough pursuit right there, right? Where it's too easy to get lost in the sauce of I'm not going to be the best of this, so why am I doing it? That's like a crippling behavior that people have, right? So, um, dude, I appreciate this. This was a good chat.
Yeah.
It's, these podcasts are really tangential, but that's kind of the goal. So, we'll have to do it again sometime. Where can people find you?
So on Instagram, I am wolf_pack_strength. Coaching wise, we don't do too much on the website, but you can check out the website Rebuild Stronger. I believe it's online, or is it Rebuild Stronger? I can't
I
remember.
think it's Rebuild
Look
Stronger
up what.
online. I
Yeah.
think I know it. I think it's Rebuild Stronger.
That you can check it out a little bit, or me, John, Jared, Dave, we're all on Instagram. But yeah, that's really it. That's my two spots. I'll be finishing up school here in a bit, so actually I'll hopefully have a little more capacity to keep adding to the roster. I'm excited for this quarter because I only have one class, and so I can add some. But yeah,
When do you graduate?
actual ceremonies in May. I'll be done classes like I think mid-March. So
Cool.
yeah,
Nice. Congratulations. Thanks for being on.
appreciate
We'll
it.
have to talk again in the not too distant future, but I appreciate your take and it's good perspective. So honestly, that this mindset stuff we've gotten into the end here has been really powerful because I think a lot of people struggle with that. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I honestly think it's probably one of the least gone over things. Like again, I know we're ending, but everyone will go into the biomechanics of lifting and whatnot, and it's just like, and I also get it's a hobby sport, and we're not maybe taking it as seriously, but I still think like just psychological value for the life stuff is super super important.
I
So
think that's one of the
it's an
main
area I
benefits.
think needs to be explored. Yeah,
I think that's one of the main benefits of training is that you start to build confidence in your capacity to do discount. That's kind of a cliche, but uncomfortable shit. But I really think it's even just building confidence that like you can withstand difficulties and find things that you enjoy and pursue those for the sake of enjoyment. I think is really powerful. So yeah, good stuff, dude. All right, man. Good luck on the bench. I'm working the same way, so we'll see where it goes. Peace, bud.
appreciate it.
See ya.
Thanks.